Anita Sarkeesian returns for what appears to be the final time, so let us load this gun of diversity and blow our patriarchal brains out.
In 2013, 2K Games released BioShock Infinite, the eagerly anticipated follow-up to the earlier, hugely successful BioShock games. Infinite's story centers on a man named Booker DeWitt, a private investigator with a bloody past who takes on a mysterious assignment: bring us the girl and wipe away the dead. What follows is Booker's adventure to the flying city of Columbia, where the girl, Elizabeth, has been imprisoned in a tower for her entire life.
It's interesting to consider how this story kind of played out in the classic fairy tale sense. A powerful man trying to save a woman from a ferocious beast.
Busting her out of captivity while she busts out of her corset, Booker shoots his way across Columbia, getting caught up in all sorts of drama in the process, as the game tells players a garbage story which suggests that oppressed people are just as bad as their oppressors and that the truth is always somewhere in the middle.
This is the terrible thing about reality. That is the case. That is true, at least as far as the way I perceive reality. Each and every one of us on this planet have a unique set of memories and perspectives from our life experiences that have made us who we are. And there's no such thing as good versus evil, because there is no good and there is no evil. And most of the time, you'll find that the things that appear good and the things that appear evil look exactly the same.
But that's much too big a can of worms for us to open in this video. Let's just focus on Elizabeth. Elizabeth possesses an incredible ability to open portals to other timelines, an ability that plays a significant role in the plot as Booker and Elizabeth hop forward and backward and from side to side in time, leaping from one version of Columbia to another, and sometimes thrusting Booker into the past or the future. So as a plot device which drives elements of the game's narrative, she's very significant.
It is, however, important to point out that when BioShock Infinite first came out, it was common consensus that Elizabeth was one of the few very useful companions that appeared in modern video games.
In gameplay terms, however, Elizabeth serves a different kind of role, that of a glorified door opener.
Here you go.
And this is where I would initially disagree. Elizabeth hands you ammo, money, and all sorts of other things very frequently throughout combat. She is a very effective ally.
As with most shooters, BioShock Infinite often puts you into situations where you can't progress until you've cleared an area of enemies. The way it frequently does this is by blocking doors to the next area that can't be opened by Booker. Only Elizabeth can do this, which she does only when all the enemies have been killed.
Well, this is just how video games work. Usually you're supposed to clear out a whole room or area for baddies, for bad guys. Just clear them all out, and then you can proceed to the next area. Like 90% of all video games do this.
For all of her tremendous powers, Elizabeth is reduced by the game's mechanics to doing the most basic and menial of tasks, and waiting around for her to open a door becomes a significant aspect of how players experience her.
Let me scout ahead, see if there's some way to move forward.
And this is just where Anita is simply wrong. Elizabeth plays the role of a sort of supporting class. She opens up things for you to, what are they called? Rips, I believe. It's been like 5 years since I played this game. But she opens up different dimensions in the same area, so you can send in robots or get extra guns, those type of things. And it works out very, very well. She is far from useless and far from a token woman. She's very powerful on her own right, and with that, you end up really respecting her as a character.
Of course, she performs other actions as well, sometimes tossing Booker ammo, first aid, or other useful items, or opening tears through which he can have her summon things like weapons or killer robots to help him in combat.
Elizabeth is far from the traditional damsel in distress. Throughout all of the major gunfights in the game, she provides you with more ammo, more healing, more attack routes. She ends up being a supporting class in her own right, so to say that she is somehow useless is a bit disingenuous.
Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with the idea of characters who play a supporting role in combat situations, but Elizabeth is an example of a female sidekick who is reduced to a tool. There aren't gameplay mechanics that allow you to have meaningful interactions with her. She just opens doors and dispenses useful things, and her tear-opening powers are not her own, but yours to call on and control with the press of a button.
Elizabeth, a little help?
Looks simple enough.
At other times, she's less like a person and more like a sexualized slot machine tossing you the occasional coin.
Here you go.
One thing I did not detect throughout this entire game was a sexualized relationship between Booker and Elizabeth. And Elizabeth, while she may be very pretty, she is not sexualized in any way, and there's a big reason for this. Spoiler, if you haven't played this game by now, it's rather old, but I'll say it again. Spoiler, if you plan on playing Bioshock Infinite, please turn off the volume. She is your daughter. Therefore, there is no romantic relationship between the two characters, and in fact, they're very careful to sexualize Elizabeth for this very reason. There is an almost cohabitable power between the two of them.
As a glorified gatekeeper, Elizabeth joins a long tradition of female sidekicks, including Alex from Half-Life 2 and its follow-up episodes, and Yorda from the much-beloved Aiko, whose magic is needed to activate doors, staircases, and other mechanisms that allow players to advance.
It almost seems like these female sidekicks that you're trying to demean actually contribute more to the world than you do, Anita.
Yorda also has a distinction of being the quintessential example of what I call the Damsel escort mission. You know, after making 3 whole videos about damsels, I'd kinda hope to never have to talk about them again.
So do we, Anita. So do we.
But gaming's love of using helpless women as both narrative and gameplay devices was too much for even those videos to contain.
It's almost as if men and women have different types of roles that they contribute to society. Not that that's a good or a bad thing.
Damsel escort missions occur when a female character joins the male player character, but is largely helpless, and rather than being a clear benefit to the player, she feels more like a burden. In Aiko, players free Yorda from a cage early on. She then joins Aiko on this journey, and much of the game consists of solving puzzles so that Yorda, who can't make leaps or climb walls on her own, can traverse the environment. Meanwhile, players also need to protect her from the shadow monsters who sometimes try to whisk her away. Spoiler alert. Yes, in the ending cutscene, Yorda carries Aiko out of the crumbling castle. But what the narrative tells us or shows us in the end doesn't undo the impact of how we experience a character through the gameplay.
You know, this might just be a story of a boy protecting a woman or a young lady throughout all of their adventures. And at the end of it, she has an opportunity to save his life. And she sacrifices herself to save him. In its own way, it's kind of beautiful. It's sad, but it's beautiful. And that's art. Sorry, Anita.
Another classic damsel escort mission occurs in Resident Evil 4, where Ashley Graham, the president's daughter, has caused players tremendous frustration over the years by burdening them with the need to protect and manage her. Whether they're presented as capable or helpless, female companions often encounter situations in which they just can't proceed on their own. Ellie in The Last of Us, for instance, is hardly a Yorda-like damsel, but when she encounters a body of water, she may as well be, and Joel has to go out of his way to get her across.
For fuck's sake, so... Hey, you have a perfectly strong feminine character, but she's vulnerable this one point in the game. God damn it.
Now look, there's a lot to admire about The Last of Us, but I guarantee you nobody's favorite part of that game was helping Ellie get across the water. A good rule of thumb is that if you spend any portion of a game carrying a female character around, it's a pretty safe bet that it at least has some elements of the damsel escort mission.
Look, we all hate escort missions, okay? We all do. But a lot of those times, say in Ubisoft games, I'm following around a guy or I'm protecting a guy. It's not always a female, but it's always frustrating no matter what. So I think we should, I don't know, maybe take him out.
No, you're heavier than you look.
To be clear, there's nothing whatsoever inherently wrong with depictions of people helping each other in times of difficulty. If anything, we could do with a lot more narratives that focus on companionship, cooperation, and support. But the models games give us rarely offer experiences in which this kind of support is truly mutual. Instead, we see a pattern of men frequently caring and helping women in situations where they're otherwise helpless. This pattern is rooted in sexist ideas about men as protectors and women as the ones who need this kind of protection.
For thousands and thousands of years, before humans could communicate with each other globally or even from one area to another, men were the hunter and gatherers and women were the caregivers. It was a kind of a trade-off. It's the way our biology works. I mentioned this in a previous video. Dimorphic sexuality, right? So there's one configuration and another. And sure, there are some mutations and anomalies, but generally speaking, almost every species on the planet Earth has a male and a female. There's not a problem with that.
It's coded into the gameplay that men are the ones who kill and protect, and that women are the ones who experience moments of helplessness and need to be carried. When these female characters are of aid to the player, it's often in rudimentary ways, as a glorified door opener, or even as a more basic tool. In the Ocarina of Time dungeon, inside Jabu Jabu's belly, players must carry the snobby Princess Ruto around, at one point even using her as a weight to press down a switch.
This is a bit of a bad example because from what I remember from this dungeon, this is right before a boss fight, so the reason you drop her on the switch is so you wouldn't have to babysit her while you fight the main boss. Just so you can focus on fighting the enemy and engaging with the actual gameplay rather than trying to protect somebody.
And in Metal Gear Solid 5, you've got 4 sidekick options to take with you on missions: a dog, a horse, a robot, and a woman. Finally, female companions often function as cheerleaders, doling out little ego boosts to players for gunning down bad guys or pulling off other feats.
And I have to get you out of here. Now come with me.
Along with the glorified door opening and the damsel-like aspects, female sidekicks are there to make players feel better about themselves, to make them feel important and skilled.
It's almost as if this female character is very supportive emotionally and in a lot of other ways as well. Not just to the player, but to the character of the game. So her role as a female is very important to not just the story, but it's for the relationship between the two characters.
You did it! You did it!
Wow! You're so cool! You're just trying to impress me.
Were you impressed? Got all those guys all by myself?
But these interactions are rarely depicted as mutually supportive. It's not nearly as common in these scenarios for the male player character to offer emotional support to their female sidekick, to tell her that she's doing a great job.
Because that would be riveting gameplay, wouldn't it? Babysit the emotions of your NPCs. That sounds just lovely. But there are some games where you can think the characters in your games.
These particular sidekicks aren't designed as characters that players can actively engage in developing a relationship with. Characters who are fully fleshed out people with their own goals and desires that sometimes require players to compromise their own wants or desires.
So what she's saying is you shouldn't be able to just enjoy a video game. All of the NPCs and all of the side characters should have emotions that you should have to cater to.
This pattern of female sidekicks who serve more as gameplay devices, door openers, and ego boosts than as people is a design approach rooted in the idea of games as power fantasy.
I'm of the opinion that supporting class and emotional support is just as important as DPS. But hey, that's just my opinion. Apparently it's not Anita Sarkeesian's.
Players get to feel powerful and important, sometimes issuing orders that are obeyed without hesitation or doubt.
It's like faith or teamwork or something like that. Can you imagine just as a team doing whatever your teammate told you to do? I mean, shouldn't you question every command at every given turn?
Companion dynamics in games almost never model what equal footing, cooperation, and collaboration in a relationship might look like, but instead serve to make the player feel like the center of the world, the one in control, which is not at all a model for healthy relationships.
That's right, folks. This isn't about having a good time. This is about replicating real life.
Of course, a huge number of games focus on men fighting alongside other men, and in these games, the male companions often have some of the same characteristics we sometimes see in female companions.
And that's at least 10 more confirms, Hunter 2-1, good shooting.
It's very common for male characters to compliment the player on their good shooting, or to breach a door that the player character can't open himself. However, typically these characters are presented as equal participants in the conflict. In shooters ranging from Call of Duty to Gears of War, the player's male companions are armed and active, and are portrayed as playing their part to fend off or eliminate the enemy threat. Occasionally in these games, male characters do have to protect other men, but unlike scenarios in which men protect women, these less common instances don't reinforce pre-existing cultural attitudes about men, women, and gender. Similarly, the occasional situation in which a female character protects a male one, which happens in the 2013 Tomb Raider reboot, among other games, also isn't a problem, because it doesn't work to reinforce limiting, harmful ideas about women or men that already exist in our culture.
Pretty much like she's saying you can't portray women in a way that she doesn't like. The artist has the freedom to portray any character any way they fucking please.
In other words, we live in a culture that says, generally speaking, men should be the protectors and women should be the protected.
Why is sexual dimorphism a bad thing? Why is having a powerful one to take care of a more fragile one that is able to, say, give birth, take care of the home, why is that a bad thing? I really can't see how, in a way, that's demeaning to either side when both of them contribute to make a whole.
When women function as competent companions whose skills are more or less equal to those of the player character, it can challenge these ideas. The Last of Us goes against the grain by giving us the character of Tess, a somewhat rare and refreshing example of a woman who fights alongside the male protagonist. And the later Gears of War games do a decent job of including female squad members who are on equal footing with their male counterparts. And thankfully, we're seeing more games that complicate and subvert the old patterns, providing players with relationships with supporting characters who don't function as mere extensions of the player, but who feel like separate individual people. The 2016 indie title One Night Stand throws players into a situation with a female character who clearly has her own feelings and her own desires, and communicating with her is a matter of trying to find some common ground for mutual understanding, not one in which the player is in total control of the situation. In Left Behind, the wonderful add-on for The Last of Us, Ellie's companion Riley is not someone players can issue orders to or someone they have to protect. Riley is constantly active, often taking control of the situation, sometimes competing and being playful with Ellie, and as a result, she doesn't feel anything like the companion characters in most games.
I've got a feeling there's a different reason she's praising this particular character. I don't know. Just a feeling I got.
Or even anything like Ellie herself felt in the original game. Instead, she feels much more like a real person accompanying Ellie on the journey. And while Trico in 2016's The Last Guardian may not be a human character, he does possess some of the characteristics we'd like to see more of in human companions in games.
This is completely opposite to what most people who I have talked to have told me about playing The Last Guardian. From what I have heard, Trico is incredibly frustrating to try to communicate with, because he kind of has a mind of his own. It doesn't translate well to a video game.
Asking Trico to do things isn't a simple matter of pushing a button and watching him immediately obey. He's not a simple tool, not just an extension of the player. Sometimes he's hesitant, reluctant, even frustrating, but this makes it feel more like he's a living, breathing creature with thoughts and feelings of his own, and by taking time to pet him, you can sometimes express your connection to him in ways that fall outside of the requirements of the gameplay and the story.
That's right, folks. What Anita Sarkeesian is saying is all video games should have characters that you have to treat like regular people instead of just enjoying the story that's being told in the game. Everything should be a real-life simulator where everyone has feelings and all women are the opposite of fragile.
And crucially, Trico is often the one protecting the player, rather than the other way around. He does not exist to fuel a power fantasy, but to allow for gameplay mechanics that focus on cooperation, care, and helping each other. When supporting female characters in games don't have this kind of depth, when they exist primarily to be protected or to be ordered around, they not only reinforce harmful ideas about gender, they also fail as characters. Regardless of their gender, race, class, or sexuality, a person is more than a tool, and more than a burden, and games can and should give us mechanics and stories that reflect that.
This argument that men are overly dominant over women is flimsy at best. Together, men and women have a unique relationship, one that is greater than the sum of all of its parts. She attempts to make them seem terrible, but in my opinion, these games are a celebration of the relationships between men and women. And Elizabeth and Booker are a great example of that. And as I mentioned before, they have a very, very special relationship between the two of them. And Elizabeth, when the game first came out, Elizabeth was noted on Reddit as being the most effective side character of like all time. She throws you ammo, she throws you money when you need it the most, throws you health, mana regeneration. She is a really good side character. So I got a feeling that Anita hasn't played BioShock Infinite personally.